What's up, everybody? Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Overwatch video. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down the 8 reasons that you suck at Overwatch. And in this video, we're going to be just talking about some of the big reasons why you might not be improving in Overwatch, because identifying these is the best way for you to actually fix these problems and climb the ladder with ease. Now, kicking it off with the first reason that you are not doing very good in Overwatch, and it could be the big thing that's actually holding you back, and it's terrible mechanics. Now, the thing that you really need to understand is that there's 3 big pillars of Overwatch. There's positioning, there's game sense, and there's your mechanical skill, right? But the problem comes along when you make a proper decision, right? You're pushing a target that's very, very weak. You have the high ground, you have the positional advantage, you have the game sense-based advantage because you have more health, and on paper, you should be winning this matchup every single time. You're pushing when you're supposed to be pushing, and you're pushing when you have advantage, but you're still losing. And the reason is you're actually just being completely out-mechanic. Now, this could happen a lot on something like DPS, of course. That's the most common thing, but it actually happens no matter what character you're playing. Let's say you're playing a character like Honor, for instance, and a Doomfist dives on you, but he doesn't execute it very well. Sometimes that Doomfist will still kill you, even though you have perfect advantage, because you miss your sleep, you miss your shots, you miss your nade, and that Doomfist just basically ends his way into killing you, right? Now, maybe let's say you're a Roadhog in the Roadhog v Roadhog mirror. You put some damage into the enemy Roadhog, and you chase that Roadhog because you know he's going to use his breather, and you know, because from a game sense oriented point of view, he's going to use his breather as he retreats, and you're going to cancel with your hook, and you're going to kill him, but for some reason, you miss your hook on the enemy Roadhog. You can see how, even though you pushed him in the proper sense, you're actually going to lose that duel, because he's going to turn around, and he's going to hook you, and he's going to kill you, even though you really should have never on paper, and you made the right decision. Now, the good news for you is improving your mechanics is incredibly easy as long as you acknowledge that that is a problem and you put time and effort into developing your mechanical skill. And the best way to do that is to go into a custom lobby or get a custom code and practice the either gunplay aspect of your character, if you're playing like something like Widow or Soldier or McCree, or the ability mechanical thing that you need to practice, like Roadhog hooking, Ana sleeves, Winston juggling with his ultimate. There's a lot of different things that you can practice no matter what character to make sure that your mechanics are on point, and it's something that you never have to worry about, and then you can actually worry about whether or not the play you made was proper, not I messed up this play because my mechanics suck. Now, the next big reason that you are just doing really poorly at Overwatch in general, and it's just lack of understanding of the simple fundamental rules of Overwatch in general. Understanding the symbiotic relationship between a tank, a DPS, and support. How it's a DPS's job to zone away enemy DPS by putting damage into them. It's a support's job to keep the team sustained while actively looking for plays or enabling their team with their abilities, and it's a tank job to create space, and this is something that feeds each other. Understanding that is incredibly important, but let's talk about more actionable things, like allowing one person to stay on cart while the rest of the team pushes up, or understanding that chasing down enemies is actually worth getting off the objective if you can chase down and wipe the enemy. Often, you need to actively fight against some of the things that a lot of your teammates will be saying in rank. One of the big ones that you often hear is, oh, we can't play like this pro team, or we shouldn't be doing this thing that pros do because we're not pros. These same people will say, oh, you have to play double shield because it's meta, while at the same time saying you can't imitate what pro players are doing in individual matchups. A lot of people need to understand that the way that we learn about Overwatch is from the top down. Everything that you know about meta, everything that you know about the proper way to play, always gets filtered from the top to the bottom. And if there's a strategy or a specific thing that high-level players are doing, such as putting one person on cart and pushing up, staggering the enemy, doing a complete team wipe, taking a fight without using ultimates, these are fundamental things that apply to everyone. It's just that the lower ranks don't do them. It's not that you can't do them. It's not that they aren't viable, and if you start putting it in your mind that some things trickle down and some things don't, your game sense might be stunted in Overwatch, and you're never going to really see the game the way that high-level players see the game. Now, moving on to the third reason that you are just doing really bad in Overwatch, and it could be holding you back, and it's that you're not winning straight-up duels, or you do not understand duel win conditions. So essentially, in your mind, every single matchup, no matter what character you are, whether you're a tank, a DPS, or support, you should be thinking about what characters have a fundamental advantage against you, and what characters have a weakness against you, and in what ways can you exploit or play around said weakness. Let's first think about the matchup as something like an Ana versus a Roadhog. From the Roadhog's point of view, he needs to understand that he has a very big weakness up against Ana because he can get CC'd due to her sleep, and his heal, his most powerful way to get out of danger, can be completely halted by her anti-nade. And from an Ana's perspective, she needs to be constantly looking for that because she has one of the best kits to exploit that weakness, that easy target for easy value on the enemy team. Now, of course, that Roadhog can play around that by tracking where the Ana's location is, not appearing in open space, and even playing around potentially getting naded, but still being safe enough positionally to actually get away from danger. Now, these are the layers that you should be thinking about every single character in the entire game. Whether you're a Zen up against a Doom, or whether you're Genji up against a McCree, you need to understand what are the win conditions that you can create that will either give you an advantage in the head-to-head matchup, or give you a potential window that you can exploit for value. Or on the flip side, what do you need to specifically set up, or how do you need to play to make it very difficult for the enemy to exploit you? For example, you're playing that Zenyatta, right? And the enemy has a Doomfist. Constantly communicating that Doomfist position, putting a Discord on him incredibly early, and positioning in a way that makes it very hard for that Doomfist to dive you isolated. These are all things that you can make it much harder for that Doomfist to exploit the natural predatory matchup that y'all have. Now, this is really why at the start of every single one of my VOD reviews, I always circle the enemy team compositions and talk about an individual character's matchup against every single person on the enemy team, and how well you operate against duos on the enemy team as well, because that's something that you should be thinking about in every single game. How does your character stack up against the enemy composition, and where are the opportunities, where do they lie, and what things do you have to be careful of? Now, moving on to the next reason that you might suck at Overwatch, and it's not adapting to your composition. Now, I'm not just talking about swapping characters. You don't always need to swap characters to adapt to your composition, but it is important to understand that some characters are going to be much harder to play with certain compositions. For instance, if you're playing something like a McCree, if you have a Sigma or some other shield, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get value. You can play on that front line. But if you're playing with something like a Roadhog and a Wrecking Ball, if you don't adapt the way that you're actually playing, there's no way that you're going to get value, so maybe it might be better for you to swap. But even more than that, understand what does your composition do, and what is a way that you can adapt your play to work with the current and get easier value. For instance, you're playing Tracer, and normally when you play Tracer, you don't try to go for the DPS, you try to flank the supports and find some way to burst them down. But now that you have a Wrecking Ball on your team in this hypothetical scenario, you are, instead of going first and trying to create that action, you are instead waiting for the contact of your ball to slam down, to look for an opportunity to easily track someone that gets slammed, regardless of if they're a DPS or a support. Now, at the same time, if you're the Wrecking Ball in that scenario, you could be calling for it or specifically targeting something that is in the effective area of where your Tracer is, or do things like forcing a cooldown that your Tracer can capitalize on, like, for instance, forcing a grapple out of an enemy Widowmaker. This is all not only consistently thinking about what your teammates are doing, but adapting your individual play to make it easier for your allies to get value. Another big problem that happens all the time with tanks and DPS is they don't adapt the way they play depending on their support composition. Now, I know in a perfect world, when you're playing something like Genji, you have healers that can easily heal you and enable you. But if you don't, if you have something like a Lucio and a BAP and you're across the map, you can't expect to get heals just peeking their LOS. But if you have an Ana and you position in a way that's hiding from the enemy LOS, but in the LOS of your Ana, you can get heals from across the map, and that can fundamentally change what flanks you go on, how you engage, where your get outs are, and this is something that you need to constantly be thinking about. And I find this one of the big reasons why sometimes players will just pop off one game and just feed the next, and it's because they're not adapting or changing up their play style for a different composition they're not used to. Now, move on to the next reason that you are just not playing very well in Overwatch, and it's pretty simple, it's a pretty quick one, it's just getting picked too much. Maybe it's because in Overwatch you respawn every time you die, but a lot of Overwatch players really don't value their life at all. They maybe have lost a couple people in a fight, and they just go and do something absolutely crazy, and they get themselves picked off, or they're pushed up way too aggressively without their team, and they get picked off before the fight even starts. A lot of times, the true mark of how well you're doing as a person is actually how little you die overall. It's okay if you're not winning every single team fight, but if you're getting picked off and being the catalyst for the reason that you're losing these team fights prematurely, then you're honestly throwing your own game. Your life is the most valuable resource, and as long as you're alive, your potential impact is exponentially higher, and in some cases even infinite. Don't trade your life for no value, and don't just throw it away for really menial attempts to make plays. Now we're going to the next reason that you just aren't playing very well in Overwatch, and it could be the thing that's actually holding you back, and it's not consistently playing towards ability and ult win conditions. Now, a lot of times when a team fight starts and team fights are actively going on, people feel like they just have to keep running at the enemy until one side remains victorious, but that is not the way that you should be playing team fights. A lot of times you need to set up a win condition or set up an ult combo that you're going to be using in the fight. For instance, let's say you're up against the enemy team and your Zarya has a 70% and she's almost to grab and your Hanzo has Dragon. You are not playing to full commit to the enemy. As a team, you should be playing far more passive, building up that Zarya's ult charge so that you can convert on that grab Dragon. This means instead of opening yourself up to fire and forcing that team fight right off the bat, you're giving enemy space, backing up as much as you can just to allow your Zarya to build up that charge and then allowing her to convert on the enemy with that grab Dragon combo, but making sure that no people get picked off before that combo goes through. That is the win condition. That is what you are playing for, and a very common call you would say is say, hey, play passive, we're gonna play for grab Dragon. Now you probably felt the tail end of this, like you're fighting a really long team fight and then out of nowhere the enemy Genji like nano blades and kills your entire team. Yeah, they played for that win condition. I can promise you at the beginning of that fight they probably didn't have nano blade, but they built it in the middle of the fight. You can really see why tracking ultimates is important, because then you get to understand not only what ultimates can counter your ability combo, but you can actually set up in a way or be aggressive, overly aggressive in a way to try to disrupt that enemy team combo. So like if the enemy team is setting up for that nano blade and you know that they don't have it yet, pushing that Genji or that Ana really aggressively, getting a pickup on there can shut that combo down outright. Now when you start thinking about the game as this, when you start thinking about team fights as build-ups and setups for ultimate combos and even ability combos, that can be the way that you're consistently playing towards these win conditions that are going to win you more team fights overall. And as we've already talked about, more team fight wins means just more games won. Simple as that. Then we're going to the sixth reason that you are having a hard time in Overwatch right now, and it's just lacking understanding about the majority of the cast. Now, a lot of people often ask me, how do I know about every single character in Overwatch? And that's just because I've played every single character in Overwatch. Now, often on this channel, I really teach specialization, which is one of the best ways to improve at Overwatch, specifically your mechanical and your positional aspect of a character. You're going to improve much faster if you stick to a certain amount of characters. However, it's still important for you to learn the cooldowns, the mechanics, and some of the fundamentals of every single under character in the game. Now, I'm not saying that you have to play these characters in ranked. In fact, I wouldn't even suggest that. I would, however, suggest walking around these characters in practice range, playing with them in quick play or free-for-all, and learning the cooldowns, the general feel, and what is in the mind of every single character when you're playing it. Understanding what things are easy to do on a character and what things are hard. How do you push an enemy character in a way that makes it so they have to perform extraordinary in order to get out of that situation alive? Basically, learning at least the bare bones of every single character in the game is just going to improve your game sense and make you a better player in general at Overwatch, and you're going to easily be able to exploit enemies a lot easier on your main when you're playing in your ranked games. Now, the last reason that you are not climbing in Overwatch is you don't got that game lead premium. No, I'm just kidding. It's because you are not practicing what I call Overwatch discipline. A lot of times, the true way to easily tell how good a player is at Overwatch is by how many mistakes they make. You see, a lot of times when you're talking about someone in Grandmaster, they might make 3 or 4 big mistakes in a game, and someone in Masters might make like 30 mistakes, in Diamond, hundreds, and maybe in Bronze, you're making more mistakes than you're making correct decisions. Essentially, every single time you're playing a game of Overwatch, you always need to be pretty hard on yourself, not to the point where you're beating yourself up, but just to the point where you're identifying the mistakes that you're making, and every time, try to pick out one mistake that you made, and try to work on that for the next game. If every single game you take one mistake away at a time, eventually you're going to be making less and less of them. And if you have to go grind your mechanics, go do that. If you have to go learn something about weapon stats or anything like that, go do that. but identifying these mistakes and ironing these out slowly is the one true way to slowly but surely become better and better at Overwatch. And this is the number one thing I suggest to people, especially if they hit a brick wall where they feel like they can't improve no matter what. But that's all I got for you today. Thanks so much for coming by. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.